Welcome to the Thought Leadership Table. My name is Josh Chapman. I'm the VP of Operations for Cars.com. I'm also on the ICMI Conference Advisory Board. So we have a great group of folks here, and we're planning to talk about self-service. So to kick things off, I'm going to ask each of the gentlemen to introduce themselves and talk about their background.
I'll start off. Hi, I'm Peter Fitch. I'm with Avaya. I've spent the last 8 years with Avaya. Prior to that, I spent 4 years with Nuance. And so my background is in self-service automation, traditionally around speech, but as you look at it now, it's bridging into email, SMS, video, things of that nature.
My name is Kevin Frederick. I'm with OneReach, and we are focused primarily on user experience through both voice and text messaging as communication channels for customers and allowing them to choose their channel of preference when communicating with businesses.
I'm Mike Muccino. I'm our VP of Sales here at Smart Action, based in California. And we are an artificial intelligence-enabled voice self-service platform. I'm excited to talk to you guys about self-service in general today.
Awesome, thank you guys. So the first question, this is probably my favorite question, so I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Will self-service ever replace the live agent?
I guess I'll take that one. That's not an easy question. And I think that eventually it will certainly become more prominent. From our perspective, the future of automation, when it gets to a point that will actually replace a live agent interaction, has a lot to do with big data analytics and being able to appropriately use that information to anticipate questions from customers. And that concept of anticipatory contact is something that we're seeing to be more of a driving force in the industry. And in order to achieve that glorious destination that I think everybody wants to get to, we've got to do a better job of collecting data from disparate systems and not just one single contact record.
And I'd add there that I don't think in the foreseeable future you're going to replace an agent with self-service, because you have good speech recognition today, but what's lacking is good speech understanding. You may look at some systems where like nuances, how may I help you? And that's really about understanding why the customer's calling, and even just automating that first step is very expensive, large procedure, and that's really about finding out what the customer wants to do and then transferring them on to the resource that they need or to the automated service that they need. So a lot of what I think you'll see is better implementations of automation that cover wider channels, so you have a choice across channels, and then better implementation of technologies we've actually had for a number of years now.
If I can just make one comment on that concept of choice is a very important one, and I think we'll know when self-service has kind of arrived as the primary way that people will communicate, when customers actually opt for it instead of opting immediately to speak with the person. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I think those are good points made by both gentlemen. But I think that definitely the amount of live agents that are going to be on staff in a contact center is definitely going to be dramatically reduced with the advent of and continued growth of technology, this artificial intelligence element adding contextual understanding to conversations, where it becomes a lot less robotic and a lot more human-like in the tone of the conversations that are created with customers. I think that live agents are always going to be a part of the process, but they're going to become much more highly specialized around high human touch conversations and probably more sales type environments where I think I have a bias as a salesperson, but I think humans are always going to be the best at sales.
So
yeah, exactly.
I don't want to speak on your behalf, but if I were going to summarize, I think all of you pretty much said probably never completely eliminate the live agent, but reduce it, continue as the technology advances and we get smarter. Okay, excellent. Being a guy who runs a call center, I'm kind of glad to hear that, because it would be a lot different if it was just the technology. This is a great question. Can self-service be taught to the customer without alienating them? I'm curious. I I actually wrote a blog post for ICMI about some different self-service implementations I've done over the course of my career. And I talked a lot about this very issue. One client I had who tried to teach their customers and we ended up alienating them. So I'm curious if you think that's something that can be done.
Well, I don't think you teach them per se, because I think customers that dial in don't have the patience to listen to long tutorials or things of that nature, but I think the way that you make it effective is to make these systems conversational. So I think the biggest failing most of these systems have, so in your point about people that immediately hit zero, well there's some segment that'll always do that, but a lot of people hit zero because it becomes obvious fairly quickly that this system is not going to satisfy what I called about. So it's really about understanding who the customer is first and communicating with that person in a conversational-like fashion so that they don't necessarily feel like they're speaking with a robot. So if you can implement things we have today like personalization, which to your point really requires a good back-end data connectivity so that you can make that effective. So we deal with a lot of customers that you talk about personalization and they say, wow, that's a great idea and we really want to get there, but for us to do that, we've got 3 or 4 projects to do before we can really take the data about the person and understand who they are so that we can personalize that content.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the question about teaching, I guess I would question that word. There's a difference between teaching your customers what to do and guiding them through a process that they are engaged with that includes giving them choices. As an example, one of the things we've been studying and writing about for ICMI is a concept of a channel pivot where when a customer calls in and is being presented with an IVR, to give them the option to press star so they can transition to a text conversation. And then now just that one choice shows that you've respected your customer's preferences and you're listening. Now once they're in that text channel, then you have another opportunity to guide them through some automation to either allow them to serve themselves over the channel that they chose to use, and if that fails, then of course you can turn it into a text chat conversation. But to teaching and guiding, I think it's time for our industry to be paying attention to those types of words and to look at it from the customer's point of view and ask ourselves, what would we prefer? If I'm the person on the other end of the phone, what do I want to do? And by starting there, you can often create delightful experiences.
Yeah, I agree with take a slightly different angle to the teaching word. I think that the way that we think about things is teaching implies that there's something negative behind or that we're trying to convince them to do something. In my opinion, if we talk about the effortless experience that some of you may have read, what it really boils down to is customer energy. What they care about most is how much energy am I going to have to expend to get to my destination, to get what I want out of that call. And that doesn't necessarily involve talking to a person. It involves being effective and delivering an advanced solution that's going to understand the caller and guide them to their ultimate path as quickly as possible, requiring as little energy as possible. So, to me, it's something that customers are asking for. It's not something that they need to be taught. And if you're not providing that element in engaging your customer the way they want to be engaged, then we're kind of missing the boat. So energy is critical. Giving them what they want with as little energy as possible. And to your original point, creating an environment from the onset that feels different than what they're accustomed to. It's not a conventional IVR that's clunky and robotic. Getting buy-in from the caller that this is something different and they're going to get what they want out of that call.
So it's interesting. I didn't say it, but we've talked a lot about IVRs. That's a lot of the conversation so far. What other technologies are driving self-service right now? What's the hot stuff that you're seeing? Maybe it's not even outside of the IVR, within the IVR, but what do you see, beyond just the traditional IVR that we think about?
Yeah, there's, I think, a lot of change right now, and we're biased to text messaging, which is obvious, but what's also obvious and yet still confusing is that everybody is text messaging, with each other, but not with an enterprise or a business. And there are some reasons for that. And part of it is because, up until now, the concept of being able to provide automation through text messaging was very limited. And the companies that were experimenting with it were looking at SMS as a marketing channel. A way to blast out a coupon code or a delivery notification that was very one-dimensional. And the problem is, as texters, we all expect to be able to engage and reply. And so, the channel was broken, and people have used it in inappropriate ways, which I think has slowed down the growth. But now, being able to send a text message to an 800 number, as an example, or to your existing phone number without having to forklift out your voice components, those are things that are possible. And so, we're looking at it and seeing that not only is the technology there, but the consumer preferences are becoming more and more clear. Forbes this week actually released an article talking about the fact that the majority of consumers would prefer to text with a business than have to call. And to me, that's a bit of an indictment on the IVR. It has a negative connotation. When you talk about phone trees with people who aren't in the industry, it's not something that they're excited to talk about. Everyone's wants to share a horror story. And so hopefully through some of these emerging channels, text being one of them, video maybe being another, it's a chance to regain some of that consumer trust and use the channel in a way that satisfies both the customer objectives and the business performance metrics.
I'd add on that that's a very effective way to do it, and some of the largest projects we have right now are in proactively reacting to a business event. So you have a lot of situations where you're going to cause your customer or force your customer to call you, and about those events. So why not proactively reach out to that customer and use the channel of their choice? So I see a lot of companies are establishing almost what I call a frequent flyer site. And that is that you can go on, set your preferences, indicate how you want to be contacted, and then businesses are driving out notifications. We're working with a large hospital chain down here to enable them to, across channels, be able to send out notifications. So you have an appointment tomorrow, and are you going to be able to make that appointment? You just text back yes, and they say thanks, we'll see you tomorrow. You confirm the address, the information they need, a link to the map so they can get there. Because a lot of times what we see, customers are engaging with a company, especially when they have multiple locations. Maybe I saw a doctor at location A, but I have to go to a clinic at location B, which I've never been to before. So you driving the information, the relevant content, and making that a two-way conversation. And doing all of that with no agent involved. But the key is that if you do need to engage an agent, you have the ability to quickly bring an agent into the conversation, continue it as an SMS, or escalate it to voice or email or video or whatever the appropriate channel is.
I think it was Larry Page that said the kinds of incremental changes that are happening are being done the same way they were 20 to 50 years ago. But when it comes to technology, it needs to be revolutionary change. And I think it's exciting to be a part of that space where artificial intelligence is adding this contextual understanding and really getting ahead of kind of the experiences that these gentlemen are referring to that are bad upfront conversations that push people to speak to an agent. But if you make an investment in a technology that really is understanding the caller and allows them to self-serve their account, they're not going to want to talk to an agent or feel that necessity to do that. So that the advancement of technology and artificial intelligence in particular is one of the most exciting, groundbreaking, revolutionary things that's happening in our space.
Excellent, thank you guys. Earlier I joked about eliminating live agents. And I think that's oftentimes when we think about in terms of efficiencies that come out of self-service is the reduction in force. But the reality is there are quite a few other efficiencies that can come out of a good self-service tool. So can you guys talk about some of the other efficiencies that maybe the average person isn't thinking about when they're looking at self-service?
Yeah, I think that the concept that was brought up earlier about preemptive messaging is a major contributor to efficiencies. For a contact center to have visibility into the most common reason that a person is calling in or emailing in allows you to kind of redefine that customer journey and insert different levels of self-service at appropriate moments. To continue on the healthcare example, it's a great one. When we work with hospitals and doctors' offices as well, and one of the things that we're seeing is, as part of something as simple as an appointment reminder, to also include some questions around payment, and to start to get the patient, in this case, to really understand that those two things are related, and to prepare them for their visit, and prepare them to meet their financial commitments ahead of time. And oftentimes that will result in that same patient not having to call in later to get clarity around what their financial obligations are. And that goes back to the analytics portion, right? So once you understand the reason that people are contacting you, then you can start to see relationships between different use cases and blend those together to ultimately reduce inbound contact volume in general.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Google, because Google implements our technology to do a lot of what we're talking about. And so you're talking about, really, in a lot of ways, kind of traditional technologies being used by the kind of the foremost technology company in the world. And why are they doing that? Well, what they want to do is they recognize that there are a subset of their customers that they always want to speak to, and they want to get to them. And so their objective is really to automate the mundane. So if somebody needs to get in, take care of a simple task, provide automation. But a lot of people are calling into a company, they're trying to reach a resource. And so the first thing you really want to do is, you don't necessarily, the goal is not to automate everything. A good system should really automate the mundane, recognize who the person is, and then understand why they're trying to call, then find the best resource for that person. It might be an automated resource, it might be a human resource, but now I'm going to interact with that person on a personalized basis versus a generic set of music in queue or things of that nature. So while you're on hold, instead of generic messaging, let's look at who you are and provide either specific or demographic information that's germane to you and not music on hold. So that's their strategy, and that's where they see the value in augmenting. And in the end, what that does is that the agent receives that information, they know who the customer is, they know why they're calling, the agent is better equipped. It takes the mundane work away from the agent so that the agent can focus on the things that are more interesting. When you interview agents when they leave, one of the biggest causes of agent turnover is mundane, boring work. And the more you can take that segment of the work off their plate, it not only makes it more cost effective, it makes their job more interesting.
Right, that's a good point that I was going to get to. There's a side benefit to weaving technology into the way that you approach your customers. As obvious benefits in driving cost out of your model, providing that self-service that we talked about that customers are pleading for. But there is a very nice side benefit in that you're allowing the contact center people to be focused on tasks that are much more complex, more interesting engagements with the customer, so their job satisfaction is going to be a lot higher. But I think it's creating that proper mix where your live agent is always going to be your most flexible, but also most expensive asset. So making sure that when you have those agents on those calls, they really need to be on them, and the complexity level is at the right sweet spot that requires them to be involved. And using an advanced solution, intelligent automation, to handle even beyond mundane calls, but some fairly complex calls in an automated fashion with a human-like feel to it.
To me, that's a really important point. Agent optimization and combining that with the customer experience, sometimes it feels like solving a Rubik's Cube, where you get the blue side, but all the other sides are now jumbled. And what we're starting to see is the ability to more appropriately blend live agent with automation. So oftentimes people think of automation as a pre-engagement screening. I went through an IVR, I qualified for certain things, and now I'm with an agent, and that's going to be where it ends. Through some of the different channels, it's text message being one of them. You can do the same thing with voice. You can allow a customer to attempt self-service. If that fails, connect them with an agent who then might say, get that same caller to a place where now it makes sense to put them back into an automated conversation. So you think about something like a password reset. As a customer, I don't know the first step, but once the agent tells me what step one is and then allows me to go back into maybe an automated text flow, now I'm thrilled. As a customer, I don't have the obligation to communicate with another person. The agent is able to move on to another caller, and both parties are happy. So I guess another way to say that is to start to consider that automation doesn't always have to be either at the beginning or at the end of an experience. The best experience allows for blending and coming in and out of automation and into live agent interactions.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I know we're running out of time, but I did have one more question, so I'll just say 10-second answer. Where do you see self-service in 5 years?
So I would say that we're really going to leverage a lot of the existing technologies we have today. I think we'll do a better job of implementing just user interface kinds of technologies where instead of technology people, I think one of the worst things you can do is to have technology people develop human interfaces. And that's been a large cause of the reason why IVRs are ineffective today. Just because you can code doesn't mean you understand good human interactions. So, the voice user interface, graphical user interface, whatever it is, needs to get better. And then I think we're beginning to see things where we're much more incorporating personalization into the channel so it's more effective. And then what I think you'll see on a lot of these channels, especially on speech, is biometric kinds of authentication which do two things. One, they shorten the call, and two, they make it more effective because we can now further personalize these interactions.
Go ahead.
I think that we're definitely, if you think about what a contact center is going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, it's going to be very different than what it looks like today. I think self-service is absolutely where it's at. It's something that customers are pleading for. And I think that if you're kind of missing the boat if you're going with these incremental changes and just kind of going with conventional solutions to really push the envelope and provide your customers what they're calling for in an advanced solution. Self-service is where it's at, and I think, it's not an either or. It's not an agent or an intelligent IVR or mobile. It has to be a multi-channel approach, or omni-channel is the catchphrase of the day. But you have to find a way to engage your customer how they like to be engaged and create a positive experience with them in every way that they touch you.
All right, 10 seconds. I got it. But I am going to answer a different question. The question I'm going to answer is, where do I hope that self-service is in the future? And the answer is that it's companies are user-centered enough to create self-service options that customers choose over communicating with the live person.
Good answer.
Well done. That was 10 seconds.
Good answer.
Sold.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. You guys
Thanks.
give them a round of applause. It's not easy being up here at lunchtime.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to see us.